Welcome everyone to the Pro Tips for Students and Educators breakout session. My hope for this session is that newer users and experienced users alike will find some interesting tips and tricks that they can implement into their Onshape workflows. My name is Drew Bennett, and I'm an Education Tech Services Engineer here on the PTC Education team. Here's a little bit more about me, but what's most relevant for today are my 6+ years of industry CAD experience and my certification as an Onshape professional. When talking about how to best master Onshape, I like to present the analogy that we should think of it as an art form. 3D parametric modeling is obviously a tool tailored towards creating functional designs, but it's also a platform with endless possibilities to turn your ideas into virtual objects. And just like art, everyone is going to have their own style, their own process, and their own vision for an end product. When you're a novice designer, your creations will often be pretty basic as you learn the tools that you have at your disposal. As you learn the tools and a process that works for you, just like an artist, you'll find it really easy to bring your visions to life in Onshape. The tips I present here today should help to step up your Onshape mastery. Today's tip topics are pulled from pretty much every aspect of Onshape, so there's going to be a wide variety of examples. We'll start with customization, go down through organization, sketching, part creation, assembly, and then we'll wrap it all up with how to best present your models. So let's start with customization. When you customize Onshape to fit your workflow and your needs, you'll be able to create better parts faster. There are 3 different tips I'll cover here. The first is the shortcut menu you can access with the S key. The second is the ability to customize the sketch, feature, and assembly toolbars. I'll end with my favorite of the 3 tips, which is feature scripts. I'll hop into Onshape and we'll look at these customization options in more depth. I've got my mechanical keyboard model pulled up to demonstrate these tools. As you can see, I've got the S key highlighted, so I'll talk about that first. Whenever you press the S key, your shortcuts menu is going to pop up. This shortcut menu that popped up is my Part Studio toolbar, and one exists for each toolbar that you have up top. If I select the sketch icon and I create a sketch on this face, when I press the S key again, I will get a new toolbar, but this time it contains my sketch tools. You can put whichever tools you like in each of the shortcuts toolbar. So to do that, go up to your name in the top right and click on My Account. The third option down on the left is Preferences. Scroll down a little ways here will bring us to the shortcut toolbar area, where we can customize which icons appear in each toolbar. I can turn them on and off and also change which shortcut menu I'm editing. Once you've customized it to your needs, save it, and then click up in the top right to return back to your document. The next part of Onshape that we can customize are the toolbars along the top of the window. I'd guess that a lot of us have gotten used to where they are by default, but feel free to adjust them to meet your needs. A simple right-click and customize toolbar will allow you to do this. When the toolbar looks like this, you can move around individual icons with a simple click and drag. You can also move around entire groups of icons by grabbing the 3 dots. And finally, if you really don't want an icon on your toolbar, you can actually just remove it by dropping it into this menu right here. I'm personally fond of all of the tools in Onshape, so I'm not going to get rid of this one. And you can also click the Reset to Default button if you want to go back to how Onshape sets it up by default. Now, my favorite way to customize Onshape is to find and use all of the useful feature scripts that I can. Feature script is a programming language that is unique to Onshape that allows users to program their own features. All of the standard features that we know and love are powered by feature script, so users who have some programming knowledge can make some incredibly cool custom features. A great place to look for feature scripts is on Onshape's selected features page, which can be found at onshape.com/featurescript, and I've just pulled it up right here. There are a wide variety of awesome feature scripts that are featured on this page, and if you scroll all the way down, it does tell you how you can add them to your account. This page was actually just updated today for Onshape Live. Once you find and add a feature script to your account, It'll appear in your Part Studio toolbar on the very right in this dropdown. You all can see that I have a ton of feature scripts added to my account. I do use some more than others, but they're all awesome. Now for this example, I'm going to use the sculpt face feature script. So for this one, I will select the face of the spacebar. I'm going to change the U and V counts here to be 5. This gives me more triads that I can work with. And then from here, now I can actually click and drag and I can morph that face to add some really cool texture to it. Now, of course, the spacebar isn't particularly ergonomic anymore. This is a really good example of how feature scripts can add some really awesome new features to your Onshape workflow. Next up is organization, because we need to make sure that all of our documents are easy to access. By using good naming techniques and utilizing document labels, you will never lose track of any of your work. So I have 2 tips in this topic. My first is my recommendation for a document naming convention, and the second is how you can implement and utilize document labels. Let's go back into Onshape and talk about how these 2 tips real quick. They might not be the most advanced tips, but I cannot stress enough how important they are. The first tip is to pick a naming convention that contains the most important information about your documents. I'll open up my UMain MEE 401 folder to show how I organized some of my school assignments. For anything school related, I recommend capturing the assignment number, the assignment name, and the name of the creator. Getting your name in the title is really important, as it makes it really easy for both students and teachers to use the Onshape document toolbar up there to search for their documents. There have been a lot of times where I really quickly make a document, I don't give it a great name, and then I spend way too much time trying to find it later, so just don't do that. For your personal projects, it also definitely helps to make sure that the title you choose accurately describes what is contained inside. Now, document labels. This one is really easy to use and makes organization a breeze. Labels are short tags that can be applied to a document. When you click on a label in the left-hand menu, it will bring up all of the documents with that label. I will click on the demo models label and see what documents that brings up. Here's my list, and as you can see, the FRC basketball robot at the top actually has 2 labels applied to it. You can apply as many labels as you want to a document if it falls into multiple categories. Now, to add a label to a document, you can highlight it and then click the label icon in the top right. I can turn this one on and off. You can also create a new label from that menu. You can also apply labels to documents. When you actually create it, right under the document name, you can apply a label as soon as it is created. There are 2 other nice things about labels that I should mention real quick. They are unique to your account, so you can create and apply them however you feel fit. And labels can also be applied to documents that come from the public space, which is really, really helpful if you find some demonstration models or public resources that you like and want to keep tabs on. Now, I have the entire MKCAD document series labeled here so that it's really easy for me to find them and insert those parts they contain into my different robotics projects. Next up is my biggest set of tips, and that's sketching, because sketching is one of the most important parts of any CAD program. When you create high quality sketches, you will reduce errors and you will make future edits so much easier. I've got 4 tips on this topic, starting with dimensioning on the fly. Then I'm going to talk about the split and trim tools. I'm going to talk about how to utilize variables in your sketches. And then I'm going to wrap it up with the most important sketching tip, which is utilizing reference sketches. So let's start with dimensioning on the fly, as this is a quick and easy tip that can make your sketches come together way faster. So let's open up that first sketch on the left and I'll show you what I mean. We grab a rectangle. Awesome. As soon as you place a sketch element, you're going to see dimensional readouts appear in a white box like that one on the bottom. If you type any number or a period, here I'll type 2.5 and hit enter, a dimension will automatically be created on the element. For this rectangle, I can actually type another dimension to do the other sides. So I'll make this one just 1 inch. That's really all there is to it. There are a fair number of times when I'm sketching that I'll use this to skip the steps of having to press the D key or click the dimension button and add a dimension after. This works for a variety of sketch elements like lines and circles too. So try it out for yourself. Now let's talk about the trim and split tools. These are two tools that I found I started using more and more as I mastered Onshape. When sketching out complex outlines like this nameplate, it's often fastest to use full shapes that overlap instead of placing each line segment individually. I'll click into the sketch so you can see what I mean by this. While it is much faster to place full circles, rectangles, polygons, what have you, this process does create a large number of closed loop shapes when we really only want one. I will click on this region here and we can see that it is disjointed from these other ones up in the top corner, which isn't the most desirable. Now, this is where our trim and split tools are going to come in handy. I will go up top and I will click in this dropdown and I will grab the trim tool. Now from here, I'm able to click on any of the extraneous lines that I would like removed. So I will do that down here near the bottom. I will grab this one. And as I start removing these lines, you can see that it is going to trim at things like midpoints and tangency points. So it's something to keep in mind. And also do be wary of trimming away elements that have dimensions attached because it can actually remove the dimension. So you can see my closed loop shape's now larger. Now with that in mind about the dimensions, the split tool is arguably even better, and I'm going to show you why. So back up in that same dropdown is the split tool. So let me grab that real quick. And the way the split tool works is it's going to preserve the elements, but it's just going to chop them up. And it's going to do that at common snap points. So if I hover over this line, I will then be able to go to its midpoint where it collides with the other line. I can split it right there. And now the line is half as long. Let me split this other one real quick as well. With these lines now split in two, I'm going to click on all the unneeded elements, and I'm actually going to make them construction geometry by pressing the Q key. This keeps the elements and their dimensions, but makes it so they no longer affect any of the features. So you can see my closed loop shapes much bigger. Let me skip over to the next part studio, show off the last two sketching tips I've got. This is a little mechanical grabber I designed up for Onshape Live. One of the beauties of parametric CAD like Onshape is that you can adjust sketches or features and your changes will cascade down your feature list. Using the variable feature makes it even easier to update and change specific elements of your Onshape designs. Looking in the feature list on the left, we can see that I've already set up a variable. So let's hop into that reference sketch to see how I did it. In any dimension box, typing the hash symbol will pull up a list of variables you've created, as well as the ability to make a new one. So let's do that real quick. I'll create a new variable for the radius on the outside of the gripper. So I'm just going to name it gripper rad. Below that, you can enter the initial value of the variable, as well as a description if you so choose. You can also see that variables can be angle, number, any. So you've got plenty of options for all the variables you need. Green check mark and an enter click will save the variable there. Then once that variable is in the dimension box, I can edit it from my feature list on the left. It'll automatically update the design. So let me change that to a much larger radius. Let's just do 5 inches, just so we can see it's very obvious when it changes. And just like that, my design has updated. This is awesome if multiple sketches are tied to one variable and should be changed all at the same time. Now, last sketching tip to cover is the most important. And that's the concept of a reference sketch. Let's open up the reference sketch so I can explain it further. Reference sketches, sometimes called master or driving sketches, are a common top-down design technique. To put it simply, you create one or more sketches to start with that will determine and drive dimensions as you create subsequent sketches and features. With the grabber, I knew that I would need some linkages. I also knew that I'd need 2 grabbers, an outline of the plate, as well as a couple other assorted pieces to hold the entire assembly together. This reference sketch locates all of the rotation points for the elements, as well as details some of the shapes. So I can see I detailed the gripper as well as the plate. Now, let's take a look at some of the following sketches to see how they relate back to this original reference sketch. Open up the gripper sketch. Looking at the gripper sketch, we can see that all of these sketch elements have a use constraint on them. All I did to create these elements in this sketch was go up top and grab my use command, which is also the U key. And then all I have to do is select elements from the original reference sketch to bring them into my current sketch. Let me control those away real quick. Now this has a ton of benefits, namely that I can easily change the shape of the gripper all from the original reference sketch and have it reflected in this following sketch. When I go back to the reference sketch and change the size of the plate, let me make this 3 inches. And I'm going to change the length of the lengths to be 1.5. Perfect. When I confirm this, we're going to see that these sketches and features that create those parts will update as well. I also know that every hole will line up and all of the links are going to be the same size because everything references back to my one source of truth, which is that reference sketch. Using reference sketches is a very common practice in professional industry settings, so it's a great practice to learn and use in your own projects. Next up is part creation, because once we've got our sketches, we've obviously got to turn them into 3D elements. So in a part studio, you can easily create and modify as many parts as you need, all in that singular part studio. So I've got 3 tips here today. I'm going to go over how to use the derived feature. I'm going to talk about some of the direct editing options you have inside of Onshape, and I'm going to wrap it up with, once again, the most important tip, which is how to use multi-part part studios. Also going to take a drink of water real quick. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the moderated Q&A and we'll take a look at them at the end of the session. Now, I found that there are times where I want to use a part from another part studio or document in my current part studio. Maybe I just need it as a reference, or maybe I'm making a similar part and I don't really want to recreate all of that geometry. If you run into a situation like this, the Derived tool is going to be your friend. When you click on the Derived icon in the top toolbar, a dialog box will pop open and ask where you'd like to derive the part from. You can navigate through your documents to find the one you like. In this case, I'll click in my FRC CAD library tab and scroll down to sprockets so I can grab one of my favorite robot parts, which is the 12-tooth 35-chain sprocket, best drivetrain sprocket there is. Now, this actually comes from a public document, but I can still derive the part because I have link document access. And just like that, I now have the geometry of the 12-tooth sprocket in my part studio, so it's really easy for me to make any changes I please. Now, this is going to be a little side tip to go with the Derived tool, but I'll often use a transform as soon as I derive a part. So let me go and grab the transform icon out of the top toolbar. And then I'm going to change it to transform by mate connectors. And once I click my part, I will click on the from mate connector and the to mate connector. I'm going to try and grab the origin. Let me get this click just right. There we go. Perfect. This kind of works like a fasten mate in an assembly, but since this is in the part studio, this is the best way to move parts around. So it's a very handy trick to use when you're working with derived geometry. Another useful trick in some cases are the direct editing tools that Onshape offers. Up here in the toolbar are 4 tools. I've got Modify Fillet. Let me point that one out. I've got Delete Face. I've got Move Face, and I have Replace Face. These are called direct editing tools because they don't work from sketches and instead rely on modifying already existing geometry. I'll click on the Modify Fillet and choose this little fillet on the sprocket. Onshape will recognize the filleted area and allow me to change it to whatever radius I choose. Well, let's make it really exaggerated. Let's do 1/8 of an inch. Perfect. Now when I roll it around, very obvious that it changed. Similarly, I can choose to move entire faces like this top bossed face. I'll click the Move Face icon, change this to Translate, and then when I choose the chamfer and the top face, those will be translated up by 1/4 of an inch. As you can see, this is a great way to quickly modify parts that you import or derive, so it's a handy tool to have in your toolbox. Now, let me switch documents real quick to show off the last part creation tip I have. Finally, and most importantly, I'm going to talk about one of Onshape's best features, which is multi-part part studios. While other programs might allow you to create multiple solid bodies in one file, Onshape has the ability to create discrete parts with their own appearances, part numbers, and metadata, all in a singular part studio. This is an incredibly powerful way to make sure that all of your parts fit together the first time. It also saves a lot of design time when you can simply reuse sketches and geometry you've previously created. This might sound a little complicated at first, but I promise that it's not. It will take some practice, and I recommend focusing on 3 things. First of all, plan ahead how your parts are going to connect. Carefully place your sketches and be mindful of their planes. and be mindful of your merge scopes, whether you're doing an add or a new feature. For example, I have my entire Flappy Bird automata machine here. This looks like an assembly, but it's actually just the part studio, and I have all 20 unique parts that I'm going to 3D print. They're present in this part studio. So I started by drawing on the front plane with the body shape sketch, and I just worked my way from there. Each new slice of the bird's body was sketched on a face of the last slice, and I often used the use command to continually take some of the existing geometry so I wouldn't have to resketch it every time. I also used mirrors to duplicate certain parts of the body. Now to make the wing, which is a little more disjointed from the rest of the body, I started with the hinge point sketch right here. And once I created that, it was very simple for me to then create the flat of the wing. Now, once I did that, this was excellent that it was all in one part studio because it was really easy for me to make sure that I left enough room between the wing and the body so that the joint would actually have room to work. All of this allows me to easily parametrically change the design as well because everything is here and I did a lot of use commands. It's really easy for me to go back and modify this original body shape sketch. I can, change the shape of the tail or change the diameter of the body a little bit, and everything will cascade down my list. There's an excellent self-paced course in the Onshape Learning Center called Multi-Part Part Studios that I highly recommend everybody check out. Making connected parts all in one part studio makes the design process so much smoother. And I feel like when I went from designing parts disjointed to designing them all together in one part studio, that's when I really went from an Onshape novice to an Onshape professional. We're now on to assemblies, because once you design your parts, you'll often want to put them together. Assemblies allow you to put your parts together, test them out, and even make new parts in context of said assembly. The 3 tips I'm going to cover here are how to use the groupmate, how to implement mechanical relations, and most importantly, how you can utilize in-context part studios. Let's start with using the groupmate. This works really, really well once you've started using multi-part part studios and are modeling parts in place. A groupmate allows you to lock the position of multiple parts in relation to each other. I currently have a groupmate locking all these fixed components together. Let me import the part studio to the CAD automata to show off how this works. I will click and drag it over here. Now, of course, no mates have been applied yet, so all of the parts are still free floating for now. I Control-Z that back, then I'm going to click on the group icon, and I'm going to click on all of the non-moving parts of this assembly. So the sides of the box, the cat's legs, and I get the body. I'm going to have to roll around and grab the other leg as well. Awesome. Now, when I confirm that and I start to drag one of the parts, they're all going to move together. All I have to do now is apply mates to the actual moving components of the assembly, and then I'll be done. A nice thing about the group mate is that it will update if you change the position of parts in the part studio. So it's a smart group mate in that way. And when it comes to making fixed structures with multiple parts, I don't think you're going to find a faster workflow than using the group mate. My next tip is taking advantage of the various mechanical mates that Onshape offers in assemblies. Got a gear relation, rack and pinion relation, a screw relation, and a linear relation. Experienced designers will often design assemblies with components that have mechanical relations to one another. To set up a mechanical relation, choose one from the top toolbar and then select the mates with the correct axis of movement. A gear relation is a really easy one to show off, and I need one, so let's put it in there. It's going to take 2 mates that have a rotational axis to them. So I will first use a cylindrical mate, then a revolute mate. These 2 mates are currently holding the gears in place. Relation ratio allows me to choose how fast they're going to spin relative to each other. The gears have the same tooth count, so I'll leave it as 1. I do already have my other gear relations set up. So now when I go to spin this handle, I'll get this awesome range of motion out of my CAD automata machine. And let me do a quick document swap. Once again, I have saved my best tip for last. When it comes to assemblies, everybody should learn how to use in-context part studios. Complex projects, both in hobby builds and in industry, often use off-the-shelf purchased components. You likely won't be creating part models of the components you purchased, but you absolutely will be placing them into your assembly. In-context part studios make it easy to model around and in reference to these parts. This right here is the drivetrain of an FRC robot I was designing to pick up and launch basketballs. This right here is the part studio, so it only contains the parts that I'm going to need to manufacture. The next tab over is the assembly. We open that up, which has both the manufactured and purchased components put together. That's why there's so much more detail here, and it looks really cool. There are two different ways I can use in-context modeling to reference these parts I place in this assembly. The first and easiest to use is to right-click on a part that's in the part studio and select Edit in Context, which is a ways down. I already have one context created, but I will create a new one for this example. When I click on this, it's going to kick me back to the part studio, but I now have a nice ghostly version of the other components that were in the assembly. Now, let's say I want to make a Thunderhex drive shaft that is going to go from the outside face of this wheel to the inside of my bearing. That is now an incredibly simple task because I can reference all of these ghostly elements when I'm making sketches or I'm making features. Also in the top left, this menu up here allows you to change your context as well as update your context if you've made any changes in the assembly and want them reflected in the part studio. Hop back to the assembly. Let's show off the other way to utilize in-context part studios. The rightmost button in the toolbar is the Create Part Studio in Context button. When you click it, you'll be prompted to select an origin or mate connector. I'm just going to use the origin for this. That's my suggestion. When I click check, a new part studio will be created, and you will see all of the components that are in the assembly are now in this new part studio as a nice ghostly version. This is great for creating new subsystems or parts that should not end up back in that original part studio. You can build here like a normal part studio, but do be mindful that you will need to create at least one feature with a reference to the ghostly assembly to maintain the context that will appear in that top left menu. Like my last part creation tip, there's a great course in the Learning Center that covers this in more depth. Everybody should definitely go check out the Managed in Context Design course if you are interested in learning more. And to wrap this all up, it's time to show it off and make it impressive, because obviously after you put in all of your hard work, you need to be able to present it well. So let's see how. Got two tips here. The first is going to be covering how to use the print functionality inside of Onshape to get really nice images of your models. And the last tip is going to be how to animate your assemblies if you want to make really cool repeating GIFs like what I have right there. So let's hop back into Onshape one last time so I can show these two quick tips. Once your design's done, you're obviously going to want to show it off. But to show it off and capture all the detail you've made, you're going to want your pictures to be really high quality. You can always take a screenshot of your model, but those can have varying quality. Sometimes Windows screenshots may or may not be the best. The way I've found to create the crispest screenshots is to use the print functionality inside of Onshape. If I click up here in the top left on the three bars, one of the options is print. Click on that and a nice dotted rectangle will pop up. This defines the bounds of the screenshot. You can change the relative dimensions here and also change whether it's portrait or landscape. Once that's done, reposition your model to be nice and in the middle. Then all you have to do is click Download Image. This is going to give us a really nice PNG image of your model that's perfect for dropping into presentations. It's actually how I got most of the pictures that are in this presentation you're seeing right now. Let me get rid of that. Cool. Last tip. If you want to make your assembly look really cool, capturing a GIF of it moving has some real wow factor. To get a GIF of your parts, you'll obviously need a screen recording capturing software of your choice and make sure it's ready to record. Once that's done, find a mate that moves in your part or your assembly. Common choices are Revolute mates or slider mates. I'm going to right click on this Revolute mate I have over here. The third option from the bottom is Animate. From here, I'm able to set the settings of the animation. So the first thing I can change is the start and end value in degrees of the range of motion. I can also set the number of steps this is how many steps through the range of motion that Onshape is going to have to compute. And the last thing I can change is the playback type, whether I want it to go once, reciprocate, or loop. I'm going to set this one to loop and click play. And once it computes, just like that, I will now have this lovely moving animation. At this point, I can start my recording, capture a full revolution or two, then I can take it and cut it into a repeating GIF. And with that, that wraps up the time I have today to show off my professional tips and tricks. I do have some time for question though, so let's see what you all have asked, and our moderator, Brian, will hand those off.
Hey, Drew. So we got one question here, which is kind of an interesting one, which is there a way to limit the range of allowed values for a variable? I had students design scalable parts, but when the dimensions fell over a certain range, the drawings can collapse. And while I know that you can't put any limit on a variable, so the answer to this question shortly is no. I was thinking maybe you can talk about configurations as a way for them to create an option for different, let's say, scales of a design.
Okay, very interesting question. Let me see what I can do to answer. So let me bring over my Onshape.
And while he's answering that, I can put the link for configurations into the chat here.
Yes. Yes. So to your point, variables like what you saw in these sketches, those, have a free range. But if you use configurations, you can actually set a range on these variables. So I've got my lovely grippy grabber back up here. So let me show how this can work. So if I go here and instead of, so this is a list configuration, checkbox, obviously just an on and off, configuration variable. Now this works the same way that you can actually put this into, features or sketch elements, but you can see here you are able to put in a default, a minimum, and a maximum value. So trying to think of a good example. There's been times where I'm designing robot projects and, I'm working with students and trying to set a range of like allowed aluminum extrusions. And this is a great way that I can set my default to be like 24 inches. I can set the minimum to be 12, the maximum to be maybe 36. And then I can just do my name as, length to 10. Let me do that. And once that's there, you can see now this has that hash symbol I talked about earlier. So that can actually be used in any of these features. So sort of a different way to use variables, but configuration variables do have the ability to set bounds. Hopefully that answers that question.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's sort of one way of attacking that issue. So another question here, how do I export parts for 3D printing?
Yes. I love 3D printing. I have 2 3D printers myself, and I do a ton of 3D printing, especially for, again, robot projects I'm heavily involved in first. 3D printing is really easy from Onshape. Just export your models as STLs. Then I bring them into Prusa Slicer. Some people prefer Cura or MakerBot, but just highlight your parts when you're in the Part Studio and a right-click export will bring up the menu. And from here, STL is your best option. Now, pro tip real quick, by default, the resolution I believe is medium. I do highly recommend changing it to fine, as your curved surfaces will have fewer like rectangular facets on them. So always do the resolution as fine when you're looking to export for 3D printing.
Awesome, thank you. As you were going through it, you were using some of those shortcuts and you had mentioned some hotkeys. I think you for using some of the sketch geometry. Are there any other important shortcut keys that can help speed up the design process?
Absolutely. The best place to learn about shortcut keys is actually going to be on the question mark next to your name. If you click that, the 4th option down is keyboard shortcuts. As you can see, there are a ton. The most important ones and the ones I use most, I really like using D for dimension and Q for construction geometry when I'm sketching. In assemblies, I do like using the hotkeys for the mates. That is incredibly easy. Yeah, M for mate right there. I also really like using the space bar. This one actually took me a little while to pick up on, but of course, Onshape has a cumulative selection process. So you click one, you click another, both will stay highlighted. If you press the space bar, you will unselect everything. So that is an awesome one to know. Other ones that I really like, E for equal, using the arrow keys to do some minor rotations. That can also be really nice. So yeah, everybody should definitely take a look at the different hotkeys here. Great place to learn and implement into your workflow. It will make your life a lot faster.
Awesome. Last one here. I saw you doing the multi-part studios part.
Yep.
And obviously this can get pretty complex if you have a bunch of different parts all together.
Yeah,
and you
definitely.
have a bunch of different features. So is there a way to keep that organized?
Yes, there is. So of course, when you're in a part studio, your feature list on the left is, has to be in order and builds up from your sketches to your features, and everything has to be in order. Now, a really easy way that I have implemented here and I recommend using is to actually use folders in these lists. So it's really easy to add a folder. So what you can do is new folder here. And then when you give it a name, you can drag features in your feature tree into the folder. Another really easy option is if you select a part, you can do add selection to folder. So normally what I will do is, like, for example, when I was making the moving links, I created all of these different features, and then I knew that I was done with the links. So I just simply shift clicked over all of them and then did an add to folder that would pop up. And then I was just put it in a folder called moving links. So now it's really, really easy if somebody else wants to go back and modify my part studios and they know that they want to mess with the gripper, this drastically cuts down on the number of features that they need to look through to find what they're looking for. So utilizing folders in your part studios is wonderful.
Awesome. That's all the questions that we have, Drew. So
okay,
we're all set.
Perfect. Thank you to everyone who attended this session, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of Onshape Live.